everybody, we're here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. He's Jason, I'm Chuck E. for the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends powered by STN Sports. And again, I'm still smiling, Jay. I mean, football's here. It was a really fun week. I mean, you had some big upsets in college. You had, a team that we thought was really good going to the big house and win. And in pros, I think the good teams are still good. The bad teams are still bad. And rookie quarterbacks are still rookie quarterbacks. But let's start with college football. I think the first thing was kind of the stunner in South Bend with Notre Dame, who had looked so good week one against Texas A&M, is at home. They go down the field. They score that first touchdown. They're huge favorites against Northern Illinois. They're paying them $1.5 million to come in, and they paid them that to get beat. So it was kind of crazy a little bit, but a little concerning with the Irish is that you've kind of seen that pattern against some weaker teams over the last couple of years, and they still have a really favorable schedule the rest of the way. I know they have a tough game against Southern Cal later in the season, but really a bad loss at home after all the hype week one against Texas A&M.
Yeah, and we did put a lot of the teams back up to be able to make the playoffs. So if you get on the app, come into the books, you can see those teams to make the playoffs, their odds to make the playoffs, their odds to win the national championship. But obviously a shocker there and big disappointment for Notre Dame fans. But again, it's not over and done with.
No,
you can
not.
run the table from here, but that's a shocking loss. And I don't know how they come forward from here. Obviously, they travel to Purdue this week, close and an in-state game.
Big rivalry game.
Yeah, and strangely enough, because of the 12 playoff, the conference realignment and the playoffs, normally this last week of the year in college football is when we get the interstate rivalries, and we're seeing it this week, obviously, with the Washington State, Colorado State, Oregon State. So a lot of the rivalries are occurring this week. So a good, not a great slate this week in college football of national powerhouses playing each other, but you get those interstate rivalries. And again, one of the bigger games for me that I'm looking at is a new rivalry. Maybe is Indiana traveling to UCLA.
Oh yeah.
Late, we'll see the kind of a Big Ten versus Pac-12, and we'll see how that lays out. But I did want to go back to, we always talk about those college football money lines and the dogs coming in on the money line. And you talked about the granddaddy of the week with Northern Illinois, who was 19-1. Plus 1,900 to beat Notre Dame outright. So that was your monster payoff if you found that one. But BYU was an 11-point dog to SMU, plus 365 on the money line. That cashes. California, a 13-point underdog to Auburn, 4-1 on the money line. That cashes. South Carolina was a 10-point underdog to Kentucky, plus 315 on the money line. That cashes. Michigan State was a 9.5-point dog to Maryland, plus 290. That cashes. San Jose State was a 7-point dog to Air Force.
And Boise should have cashed.
And there were a couple other really, really close ones. So again, I implore you, take a look at those college football underdogs. They do happen. They do happen every week. You just got to find them, study those sheets, and study the app, and look for those college football dogs.
On the flip side, looking at a favorite, and that was Texas going into the Big House. The game opened up 7.5. It did come down a little bit, but they were really impressive against Michigan.
The game actually opened up 5.5,
right.
5, and leaked all the way up to 7 and 7.5.
Before it started coming back
down.
So
the bettors were, right in tune with what was going to happen with that game, and Texas walked in there and owned the Big House. Michigan was really never in the football game. Texas, on my list of teams that were so very impressive this week, in fact, that they went in there and dominated the way that they did. Both offensively, defensively. Quinn Ewers, who was kind of in the 2 to 3 range of guys in the Heisman Trophy, now leapfrogs to the Heisman Trophy favorite at 6-1 with their performance there, and obviously what we're going to see from them as they go through now this SEC schedule.
Yeah, I think I was really impressed with the way they played on both sides of the ball and really dominated that game. So, but now let's look at college as a whole. When you look at the ratings, college football ratings right now, we know we've talked about 12 teams get into the postseason or into the playoff. 6 of the 7 top 25 teams are SEC teams. And you look at how dominant they've been early in the season, it's going to be interesting to see the way this shakes out and how they get seeded toward the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at the rankings, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, and the fact that why are we seeing so many SEC teams at the top? And those odds to win, or odds rankings compared to odds to win the national championship are a little bit different. Obviously, we have Ohio State in that top mix of teams to win a national championship. But I think what the 12-team playoff does is it opens up the world for these other top SEC programs. What we used to see with the 4-team playoff is potentially 2 SEC teams
Right.
getting in. Your SEC championship team and
maybe one other, right.
maybe their loser, and then we would see the Big Ten champion, the Pac-12 champion, the Big 12 champion. But now with 12 teams, the SEC legitimately has a chance to get 6 or 7 teams into the playoff, and we know how competitive those SEC teams are, and now they can knock each other off. So I think that's why we're seeing these SEC teams so much in the rankings, let alone the fact that we added Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, which only makes the conference that much stronger. And we've seen these SEC teams absolutely dominate through the first 2 weeks of the season. We talked about the 60-point blowouts in week 1. The coaching changes. Alabama was maybe expected to not be that awesome. They've looked absolutely fantastic. Georgia's looked good.
But these teams will
and
know,
and Ole Miss,
right.
they've been putting up points like
but
crazy.
They'll know that they play each other during conference play, but that they may very well meet again in the playoff format.
Yeah, and one of the things I also noted was with the SEC and the teams that we have at the top, obviously Georgia plus 180 to win the national championship, and you look and you say, hey, Carson Beck, their quarterback, he's plus 850 to win the Heisman Trophy. Texas 9-2 to win the national championship. Quinn Ewers now our favorite at 6-1 to win the Heisman Trophy. Bama 10-1 to win the national championship. Jalen Monroe 9-1 to win the Heisman Trophy. Ole Miss 14-1 to win the national championship. Jackson Dart 9-1 to win the Heisman Trophy. Tennessee 20-1 to win the national championship. Nico, I'm going to blow his last name, Ima Lieva 9-1 to win the Heisman Trophy.
He's been really impressive.
Those
though.
SEC quarterbacks putting up stats, playing fantastic, and that's what's going to keep them at the top of those rankings and the top of those Heisman Trophy races.
Yeah, it should be really interesting the rest of the year.
We did open up. I talked about opening up the teams to go back in and make the playoff, and some of the ones that were a little bit interesting to me, Bama still minus 170 to make the playoff on a yes. Ole Miss minus $2 to make the playoffs, and Tennessee even money. You can get yes on the even money for Tennessee to make the playoffs. So those teams again at the top of the rankings, getting some pretty interesting prices on the yeses to still make the playoffs.
Again, it's that expanded format, and as good as they look, that if one of those teams loses to a Georgia or loses to an Alabama, it's not panic button time because you're still probably going to get into
they're going
playoff.
to beat each other
Right.
up once we get to conference play. There's no doubt. Georgia getting a loss would be a question mark. But the rest of these teams, if they can get through the SEC schedule with 1 loss, 2 loss, and we see how the Big 12, the Big 10 shake out, a 2-loss SEC team's got a very legitimate chance of finding themselves in that 12-team playoff.
Another interesting thing, talking about all the losses or all the teams that didn't cover, you think about last man standing. College last man standing, we had a total of 3,452 entries. There's only 1,699 left. So you knocked out about 50% of the contestants during the first week, which is really a high number. I think it goes to show the new format, and we talked about it in the weeks leading up to the start of the season, that we're not sure what to expect right now, but 50% got knocked out week 1. So a little interesting there. Don't forget, a lot of really big college games this week. We're open earlier. Get signed up for the app. We still have the $250 up to $250 no worry wager going on, but a lot of fun college.
Yeah, and a monster game, not necessarily in our backyard, but from our backyard. UNLV taking on Kansas this week. Obviously, UNLV
a little bit of a rematch.
You looked good in their 2 performances, knocking off Houston on the road, and then a monster game against Utah Tech. But this is a big challenge going up against Kansas, where they're about a touchdown dog. They can make a statement in this game if they go and beat Kansas, a team that just lost to Illinois on the road. So they'll be looking to bounce back and get a win for themselves. But again, a monster.
Kansas beat them in the bowl game last year. So
monster game for the program.
It's a chance for UNLV to really kind of bounce back with that. So again, it should be a fun Saturday, and we're going to come right back, and we're going to jump right into pro football on the next segment of Bookends.
Hey, you beautiful Las Vegas local you. Do you want it all? Because no one has it all like STN Sports. Easy to use app with great odds? Check. Seats that make you feel like you're at the game? Check. The friendliest, most helpful team members this side of Lake Mead? Check. Convenient locations with free parking? Check. Sure, some places have this and that, but if you want it all, it's at STN Sports. Download the STN Sports app now.
Hey everybody, we're back at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for the sports betting podcast, Bookends, powered by STN Sports and Pro Football Time. So it was week 1, kind of touched on it in the lead-in that the good teams are still good, bad teams are still bad, rookie quarterbacks are still rookie quarterbacks. But what's my biggest surprise? We're going to talk about what our biggest surprises are. Teams that maybe should hit the panic button and maybe not hit the panic button. I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I'm going to look at one game. So my biggest surprise, the Patriots going into into Cincinnati and winning that game, and my panic button is the Bengals. I think it's a soap opera there. T. Higgins is the only player that was franchised that didn't get a long-term deal. Jamar Chase played in that game but didn't look effective, and this Bengal team was the largest favorite on the board and really was never in that game. They had some bad turnovers. Their offense looked out of sync. We know Burrow's coming back from the injury, didn't play a lot in preseason, but I think Jared Mayo did a great job with this Patriot team. They were physical. Ramondre Stevenson ran well. They controlled it from start to finish and really beat up a Bengal team. So for me, it's panic button for the Bengals, and biggest surprise is the Patriots being the biggest dog on the board going into Cincy and winning outright.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other answer that's correct other than the Bengals being knocked off this week and pulling the biggest surprise. It was a survivor pool killer. It was a last man standing pool killer, and so many people having the Bengals to win that game against the point spread, expecting Joe Burrow and Chase to put up monster number for their fantasy team with Higgins being out. But we talked about the offseason. We talked about it on Bookends or the week before of this offseason turmoil going on with the Bengals and Chase not practicing, Higgins with the franchise tag, what they had lost
Chase
on defense.
still doesn't have the deal.
Mixon leaving. There was a lot of stuff going on there. I think I said it probably over a month ago that I had the Bengals in last place in the division because I think the Steelers and Browns and Ravens are better. And the Browns, obviously,
that's another panic button team for me is the Browns.
Very disappointing team. I'm going to shock you with my most disappointing team, and I think that the panic button needs to be pressed, but it's our Chicago Bears. I mean, the only team that comes out with a win and wins week one, and I'm hitting the panic button. But when we have an off season where you get the number one draft pick and you do what they did on offense of bringing in Keenan Allen and Swift, and the Bears put up 148 total yards of offense, 64 yards passing when we take away the 29 yards of sacks, 84 yards rushing for 148 yards of total offense. You could have other panic buttons. Maybe the Carolina Panthers are your panic button after being blown out by the Saints. But the Carolina Panthers had 193 yards of offense. The Bears had 148 with this coveted franchise quarterback with the offense that they put together. And so I get that they pulled a win, but this to me screams help. Something isn't right. How can you put together this whole offseason and then come out with 148 yards of offense? And we weren't playing, a 49er defense or a Steeler defense. This was the Tennessee Titans at home. So they pull out the win. The defense played exceptional, but I'm a little bit scared now of what these Chicago Bears are. And they've got to go to the Houston Texans on Sunday Night Football this week. And I'm going to tell you this week, my biggest surprise and the team that I think came out of this week the best for me was the Houston Texans. They were a small favorite on the road at Indianapolis, interconference game, and they put up monster numbers. Houston had 417 yards of total offense, second in the NFL this week, only to the Baltimore Ravens, who put up 452. 204 passing yards from C.J. Stroud with Diggs and Collins and I can't believe I'm blowing the guys. Tank Dell. And that's not that surprising, 204. Right. But they worked Diggs in. He had 2 touchdowns. But they had 213 rushing yards. Mixon, their new running back, 30 carries for 159 yards against an Indianapolis team that was a tough place to go play. That place was crazy. Jonathan Taylor, Richardson. So I'm really, really impressed with what the Texans were able to do on the road, both mixing offense and defense, passing and rushing. I think that defense is going to be better. I think this Texans team is someone to absolutely look out for after their week one performance.
Oh, for me, I'm not hitting the panic button yet on the rookie quarterbacks. I think, we talked about it. Over the last 20 years, rookie quarterbacks 0-14-1 in their debut. Jaden Daniels didn't play great. Bo Nix didn't play great. And you look at Caleb Williams, he did have the overthrow to Keenan Allen, would have been a 50-yard touchdown. Keenan Allen dropped a touchdown pass, and yet he had a big scramble of 12 yards when they needed it. He converted the 2-point conversion. I get it. There's a lot of hype. These guys just don't play enough in the preseason. To me, this was his first kind of preseason game. And, I know it's early. I know he's got a lot of talent around him. The hype is there. Don't forget Peyton Manning's rookie year, 28 interceptions to lead the NFL that year. Troy Aikman's rookie year, they went 1-15. So, the expectation level is there. And I know people that watched Hard Knocks, you heard that from Nick Saban saying the toughest thing for these young players is all the hype and that expectation that they're going to come in. You have to be patient a little bit. and it's a long season. I just want to see that development for these guys, and not just Caleb Williams, but Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. I mean, they're asked to do a lot, and again, 0-14-1 over the last 15 starts for rookie quarterback making their debut. If the Bears don't come back, it's 0-17-1 over the last 20 years. So for me, I'm not hitting the panic button yet on these young quarterbacks.
I'm going to do also, it's not on the list of panic button, the things that happen on the field, but I think that one of the questions for me is also on our Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously not huge high expectations from a win total, that they're going to go win a division, that they're going to go win a conference, but there were a lot of off-season question marks whether they made the right call in bringing back Antonio Pierce as the head coach. And obviously we had quarterback question marks and stuff like that, but one of the key components of that Raiders game, down 16-10, is their 4th and 1 at the Charger 43 with 7 minutes to go, and they elect to punt. And since 2016, no team in the NFL has not gone for a 4th and 1 in opponent's territory when down 1 score in a fourth quarter. Not one, since in the last 8 years. So the NFL has changed into, this is an aggressive league and you go for it in this situation. And Antonio Pierce, who's one of them, had shown he's more conservative, but in this situation, this really seemed like a bad call. Whether they end up stopping the Chargers in that scenario and getting the ball back, the Chargers obviously in that scenario had a 61-yard run from J.K. Dobbins and then went on to score. But a 16-10 game, you've got to go for it in that situation. And I go back to the Lions last year in the NFC Championship. I think the Lions passed up on 3 different times when they could have kicked field goals. And Dan Campbell had the consistency. We go for it, we go for it, we go for it. And if you're going to live in that world of going for it, then you always got to go for it. And if you're going to live that world of not going for it, then don't go for it. But in the first quarter of the game, the Raiders went for it on 4th and 1 at their own 40. And they didn't get it, and it led to a Charger field goal. If you're going to go for it on 4th and 1 at your own 40 in the first quarter, and then decide you're not going to go for it on 4th and 1 at the opponent 43 with 7 minutes left in the game, you're not being consistent.
Right.
You got to either be aggressive or you got to be conservative. You can't kind of juggle the ball that way. I get it, but young coaches got to make good decisions. And that one, I think every coach in the league, except for Jim Harbaugh, who applauded again, that's who they were playing. I think Jim Harbaugh said, yeah, I thought it was a great decision. Of course he did, because they didn't get it, and then the Chargers were able to go and win the game. So I didn't like that call, and I don't like the direction that they're headed from that conservativeness in a team that you're not expected to go win an AFC championship. You're not expected to win a division. You've got a chance to go win a football game on the road. Take the chance.
Well, I mean, for me, it was a game that we kind of disagreed about a little bit last week, too, and that was the Browns and Cowboys. I really thought they had the wrong favorite in that game all along, and you watch that Browns, and you watched last year, Deshaun Watson just doesn't look like the same quarterback. I know they don't have Nick Chubb, but that offense looked out of sorts the entire game. That was one of the games when you looked at ticket counts, and I think John sent that out on STN Sports, that the only dog that generated the highest ticket count against the favorite was the Dallas Cowboys. You guys were clearly right on that game, and I'm really worried about the Browns right now. I think you look at that division, and the Steelers are going to be maybe that kind of surprise team right behind the Ravens, and some serious concerns or panic button for me with the Browns and Bengals.
Yeah, I think I again, was super shocked at that game. I thought that Cleveland defense at home would be absolutely fantastic. Really, they weren't that bad. If you go look at the stats, the Cowboys did not light up the box score with rushing yards or passing yards. It was really a defensive performance and turnovers and sacks and mistakes by the Browns that led to a lot of Aubrey field goals and a kind of a dominating game by the Cowboys. But yeah, I think you're right in that this Browns team, there is some worry, and there's some real worry on, is Deshaun Watson really going to be able to flip the switch to the Deshaun Watson we saw back 2021 before these injuries, because he has not looked good since he's been back on the field, since he's been a Brown.
Next year that contract kicks into $75 million guaranteed. So there's some serious kind of questions the Browns have to make. Let's move on to this week now. And Thursday Night Football, big AFC East rivalry, Dolphins-Bills. Both teams trailed in their games by multiple scores before coming back to win. Buffalo, I think, is 8-1 their last 9 games against the Dolphins. They do play early in the season here in Miami, where the weather's going to be a little bit warm. We know that the Bills will be on the sun side. That just means that Miami's going to have to play in Buffalo late in the season when weather will really be a factor. This game's kind of bounced around a little bit with Buffalo being an underdog of 2.5 points, went down to 1.5, has crept back up a little bit. It looks like Mostert's been ruled out now. Achane will be a game-time decision. Not a shocker. We kind of expected that a little bit, but a big early season game in the AFC East.
Yeah, we were big Cardinal fans last week. A lot of money on the Bills, laying the 6.5. And defensive coordinators, please put an asterisk that when Josh Allen is inside the 15-yard line, you have to anticipate that he's going to drop back and then run the football. He is their goal line back. You have to be able to stop him. He used complementary. We saw a little bit more of James Cook out of the backfield, sprinkled in Keenan Coleman, the tight ends. Kincaid did not have a very big game, but you have to be able to stop Josh Allen. That'll be where the Dolphins have to key on. This has not been a two-way matchup over the last 10 years.
Right.
The Buffalo Bills are 9-1 in their last 10 games against the Dolphins. They're 4-1 in the last 5 games against the Dolphins. In those last 5 games, Buffalo's offense has put up 473 yards, 414 yards, 423 yards, 446 yards, and 497 yards. So Miami has consistently struggled in a way to stop the Bills. And Miami's only put up 275, 393, 231, 405, and 212. So the defense is still the Miami defense, and they lost a lot of pieces on that defense. They're going to have to find a way to stop up and stand up and stop Josh Allen and have that big game, big plays from Waddle and Hill if they're going to be able to finally break the cold streak against this Bills team.
It's a big rivalry game. I mean, this early in the season, a Dolphin win kind of catapults them to 2-0. Bills being able to win a tough game on the road here would be good.
You know,
for
and
them
they had
well.
the Dolphins had a slow start last week, almost like they were handcuffed.
So did the Bills
they were
a
kind of
little bit,
handcuffed and really getting going last week. If you're catching my,
I was thinking about, but I didn't want to go there. But
moving on.
So make sure you get all your tickets in on that game, okay? Anyway, moving on to Sunday. We're just having fun, guys. To Sunday football. Niners at the Vikings. This is Sam Darnold getting a chance to play against the team he played for last week. And, hey, this Niner team, we've talked about it. They're by far the best team in the NFC. I know the Cowboys and Eagles are really good teams, but it didn't matter that Christian McCaffrey wasn't there. It didn't matter when Jordan Mason found out he was going to start, if it was Friday or right before the game. He had a phenomenal game. They ran through that Jet defense. You've got Debo, you've got Ayuk, you've got Kittle at tight end. Quarterback looked so good, Purdy. You're still going to get Ricky Purcell back at some point. They are the best team right now in the NFC. I thought that that Sam Darnold played really well for Minnesota, although they played probably one of the worst teams in the league in the Giants. But Aaron Jones looked really good. Jefferson had a touchdown. So this is kind of an interesting game. Game opened 5.5, has ticked up to 6 a little bit. We'll see if it's kind of a look-pass game for the Niners, who play the Rams the following week. But I thought the Niners were mighty impressive week 1.
Yeah, and obviously Jordan Mason coming out of the box with what he did, and all the Christian McCaffrey fantasy owners kind of in shock and what they lost in week 1. And you said it, Minnesota, a great performance against the Giants, but the expectations of that Giants team very down. But again, it was a pick'em game that Minnesota was able to go dominate. And Minnesota did make a lot of changes on the defensive side of the football, brought in a lot of guys. So we'll see if they can stand up at home this week against what you talked about, just a dominating performance.
No Hawkinson, Addison got hurt, so their offense really might be behind the 8 ball a little bit against this Niner team. Only thing I think of for the Niners is that it's a little bit that sandwich game between playing the Rams, who are kind of who are a division rival, but we'll see what happens. Another game here is with our Raiders against the Ravens. I think it's got to be a really, really tough spot for the Raiders. Number one, you play on the road. Then you have to travel the furthest distance to play at Baltimore, who has extra rest and comes off that loss on that Thursday night game against the Chiefs. This is the biggest favorite on the board. It's bounced back and forth between 9, 9.5, 10. It seems like there is some sharp money that comes in at plus the 10. I just don't get it. I think this game's going to go back up and close at least double digits, but I think it's a really bad spot for the Raiders traveling across country against a well-rested Raven team that just came off a loss.
Yeah, and a disappointed Raven team. Obviously, I talked about they put up 452 yards, more than any other team in the National Football League this week of offense, and now they get the extra rest. We saw a slimmer...
Wait a minute. Does Jim Harbaugh share any notes with John Harbaugh about.
I think they each worry about their own teams and where they're headed. But
okay.
Lamar Jackson, we saw a slimmer Lamar Jackson, able to run the football dynamically. He's always able to do so, but looked really, really good doing it. We saw Isaiah Likely, who was his target.
I'm going to interrupt
year.
you 1 second, though. I thought he looked really, really good running the ball, but I did not think he looked great passing the ball.
No.
And for the amount of years he's been in the league, you have to be able to convert. I mean, he had 2 plays on that last drive where he had Justice Hill open coming out of the backfield. The ball got knocked down. All he had to do was elevate it, and he had Zay Flowers wide open in the end zone for a tying touchdown that he missed him by 30 feet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he really still struggles for passing the ball, and has not had a lot of success against the Chiefs. He's now 1-4 against Patrick Mahomes.
If Isaiah Likely had a size 12 shoe instead of a size 13, we're talking about how they win into Kansas City.
12 and a half would have got it done.
And won the game. But again, we know the tight end Mark Andrews was hurt last year. He's back, and now a developing wide receiver in Likely, or tight end in Likely, to go along with Derrick Henry, to go along with Hill. There's a lot of weapons there, and the Chargers don't have all those offensive weapons. And so what the Raiders saw this week on the road is going to be a completely different scenario of what they're walking in to see this week in Baltimore. Didn't really get things going on the offensive side of things. Minshew at the interception, bad fumble from White that led to a field goal for the Chargers. So they've got to do some cleaning up of things, and they've got to be able to find Davante Adams. Davante Adams has got to be that guy that puts up 120 yards receiving if they're going to stay in this game and be able to cover these 10 points.
I wonder how long. I mean, granted, they're one of the few teams that starts both games on the road, but a struggle or a poor performance by Minshew, I wonder how long before they kind of go back and give O'Connell a shot. I mean, I still felt that you kind of knew what you were getting in Gardner Minshew, and he's been a really, really good backup for a long time, but O'Connell was the young quarterback, had a little success toward the end of the year. I know he had that bad interception in the last preseason game, but for me, again, I was surprised he didn't get the start, but I wonder if they go back to him or not.
I think he's got a little bit longer leach than you think, but like you said,
I think when you make a decision, you have to give him at least probably 4 weeks or give him a month. All right, another game we're going to look at right now is Bucs-Lions, a rematch of a playoff game last year that the Lions ended up winning 31-23. In that game, Baker Mayfield had 3 touchdowns, 349 yards passing. But what was impressive for me was week 1 was really how well that Bucs offense played against the Commanders. I know the Commanders aren't a great team, and defensively they really struggle. But Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans back. He has Chris Godwin back. He has Cade Otton back. He's got Rachaad White in the backfield and Tank Bigsby. I was really impressed with how well that offense looked. Tampa and Baker Mayfield might be one of those surprise teams, and I know the Falcons got all the hype in the offseason. They're predicted to win that division. They lost. We know what the Panthers are. Saints, although they beat the Panthers, still have some question marks. This Buck team with Baker Mayfield played really well, I thought, in week 1.
Yeah, and they were one of the surprises kind of coming out of the box. The Commanders were a team that was a well-bet dog, on the money line. Jaden Daniels coming out, and really Tampa Bay owned them. I mean, Jaden Daniels had some running, but they really, McLaren was no part of the game. They were able to stop Brian Robinson. I think he did score a touchdown in the game. But Tampa, the wide receivers, the veteran team that they are, absolutely dominated. And then we saw not only running back Rachaad White, but we saw them mix in Bucky Irving.
I meant Bucky Irving. I said Tank Bigsby. I'm sorry.
Bucky Irving in that
right,
game.
Yep.
And so if they can bring him in, that really brings the offensive mix. And they've always had that really stout defensive front. And obviously the secondary has been known to give things up. But again, for me here, it's a big difference in the team that you're seeing versus the team that you just saw. They were able to kind of walk through that Commanders team. You talked about the rookie quarterbacks and their performance to now going up against not a rookie quarterback and not a wide receiver group that we had in Washington.
St. Brown had a huge game in that playoff
not a line
game.
And these running backs that Detroit has. So Detroit was able to, and Detroit was a heavily bet week 1 team. Obviously they get the cover for everybody in the overtime, a dominating overtime. St. Brown did not have a big game at all. I think he had 3 catches or 4 catches for a small amount of yardage. Look for him to bounce back here in a big way. And we talked about it on Bookends a week ago, the development of Jameson Williams.
Yep.
And I think he had 9 catches. He had a big run. He scored the touchdown for him. I think that he's going to be a big contributor this year. But, man, that offensive line and just watching David Montgomery just run through that Rams offense, that defensive front in the overtime was absolutely incredible. And despite the fact that the Lions, I thought, looked absolutely fantastic. I love the game. They played a very, very good Los Angeles Rams team. That Rams team was really beat up and is beat up going into this week's game from an injury front to lose Puka Nacua in that game. But, wow, Cooper Kupp I mean, this guy was all over the field, and I think the Rams are one catch away from running the clock out.
He floats that ball just a little bit too much.
A Cooper Kupp catch, and that game's over, and the Rams are able to take some knees. So I think that those are two very good teams that we may see in the playoffs. But this is a really good matchup. You talked about, I don't think Tampa's intimidated to go play this game, knowing what they can do on offense with the veteran leadership. And this is, to me, one of the better games of the week.
And we talked about it last year on Bookends when these two teams met in the playoffs, and both number one quarterbacks, number one overall selections in Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff. So I think Tampa's kind of a little bit of a surprise team. We know how good Detroit is. They start the season with back-to-back home games, an opportunity to go 2-0 here in this game. Now let's look at another game in the AFC, and that's Chiefs-Bengals. Chiefs have the extra time to rest. They come off that Thursday night win against the Ravens. Bengals, again, for me, panic button, biggest disappointment. It looks like T. Higgins won't play again. Who knows with Jamar Chase? I mean, I think he's going to play, but is his head in it right now? Still the contract distraction. But this is a Bengal team that has had a lot of success. Joe Burrow's 3-1 against the Chiefs. So can you afford to go 0-2 in the AFC? It's a big game for them, but I think a really tough spot with the Chiefs getting that extra rest. Yet we've seen this number start to come down just a little bit. Came down from 6 to 5.5.
Yeah, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you've got to come with an all-out effort after losing at home to the Patriots. And I think Jamar Chase, obviously, not playing the preseason with the contract kind of holdout and T. Higgins not being there, they just didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle to be able to put things together. And you can see how difficult that is in today's NFL.
But I think,
when
Jay,
you don't play, you don't practice, it's hard to put things together.
It's a really good point, because you look at Dallas, and they got the deal done for CeeDee Lamb, and then Dak got that big contract the day of opening day, and he played really well. You look at
but they didn't put up monster stats.
No, but
CeeDee Lamb and
but it was
Dak
kind of behind them then, where the Bengals are the only team that, outside of Hassan Reddick with the Jets right now, but the Bengals are the only team that still has kind of that soap opera still looming, where everybody else seemed to get the deal done with the guys they needed to get. Ayuk signed with the Niners and Trent Williams did. That's behind us. Dallas got their guys signed. The only guy that didn't get signed was Jamar Chase, who looked like he was going to. So there's still a lot of kind of distractions, I think, for that Bengal team.
Yeah, and I said it. I think their offense is going to be fine. They're going to, if they can get Higgins and Chase on the field, I think that offense is going to be fine. I think Brown out of the backfield. I think Moss out of the backfield. The line is not fantastic, but Joe Burrow's talented enough to be able to find some things. I think that they just didn't have enough practice time and togetherness to be able to go and unfortunately get knocked off by what is not a very good Patriot team. On the flip side, I don't think their defense is very good at all. And now going to Kansas City, to this Kansas City team that's just really developing Rashee Rice. He looks absolutely fantastic.
And Xavier Worthy.
And those slot runs by Rashee Rice, where he comes over the middle and Patrick Mahomes is able to find him, those are going to be very, very dangerous. And you talked about the speed of Worthy. I think he only had
Doesn't he look like
4 opportunities
it's like
in the
Tyreek
game.
Hill, where they use him like that.
Again, rebounding. And knowing the effort you're going to get from the Bengals this week after that loss, this team has to take a look in the mirror and say, hey, what are we doing this week? So I do expect a big effort out of the Bengals, but the Chiefs, again, are coming off that extra rest.
To me, the Chiefs' offense looks a little bit like the Dolphins did last year. You might get Hollywood Brown back here, too. So the speed of Brown, the speed of Rice, the speed of Worthy, it's just an offense now so much different than the weapons that Patrick Mahomes had last year. They're 2-time defending Super Bowl champs. You still have Kelsey, of course, who's so good underneath. You've got Pacheco, who's a physical runner, and their defense just comes up big when they have to come up big. And now you add the speed element of these guys on offense. I think this Chiefs team is very, very good.
Yeah, and that was one of the other things that Chiefs defensive front with Jones. They were able to get a lot of pressure on the Ravens, and Lamar Jackson was able to escape and make a lot of runs of that. Joe Burrow is not that guy that's going to run for a lot of yards. So if that offensive line is not able to protect him, he's not the guy that's going to be able to run. The Chiefs are going to be able to pick up some sacks this Sunday.
And we talked about it a few weeks ago going into Bookends, how competitive the AFC was. We know it's kind of the Niners, and before the Jordan Love injury, we had the kind of the Packers, the Lions, the Cowboys, and Eagles. But you look at the AFC with the quarterbacks that they have, these Bengals fall to 0-2. I think it's going to be a tough mountain to climb going forward. That kind of takes care of all the Sunday afternoon and Sunday morning games. Let's jump to Sunday Night Football now. Kind of an intriguing matchup. It's the Bears that Jay and I both kind of talked about in different ways, the struggles they had, but they against the Houston Texans. But we've seen this game come down a little bit. It might be kind of a good thing the Bears are out of Chicago. Maybe they're a little bit more relaxed, not in front of their home fans. This team went 4-0 in the preseason, found a way. Only the third team that I think in the modern era, teams that hadn't scored an offensive touchdown touchdown, and were outgained by the amount of yards the Bears were. We're 2 and I think 305, and Bears make it 3 and 305. So they found a way to win. They're playing a really tough Texan team, and I think the model everybody looked at for the Bears is can they be what the Texans were last year? And I think that's what they want to strive for. They're a better defensive team than the Colts were, but can they move the ball a little bit against this Texans offense? But I think it's a really good matchup with 2 young, talented quarterbacks and 2 teams that hopefully have playoff aspirations. And we know the Texans are one of the top teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I thought the Texans looked the best were surprising in the way that they looked. I thought that they were one of the best performing teams in week 1. I thought the Bears, in particular on the offensive side of the football, were one of the worst performing teams. Now the Bears have to travel to Houston and figure out a way to cover these 3 receivers with Mixon and Stroud. I don't like this situation for the Bears. I think that the Bears are going to have to put up 24, 26, 28 points to stay in this game because I think the Houston Texans
offensively or defensively?
Either way, they're going to have to find a way because I think this Texans team is a team that is going to put up points each and every week. They have so many weapons, and C.J. Stroud is going to dictate the game, whether he's going to go to the receivers, what he's got that running back. I think this Texans team is a team that you should look out for in the AFC. I think that they're going to find themselves at the top of that AFC South.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I think they're really, really a good team, but I think it's a good test for a Bears defense that finished in the top 6 last year toward the end of the season after the Montez Sweat trade. And I think you look at this defense now, and you had a special teams touchdown, you had a number of sacks, you had the interception for a touchdown. I want to see how they play against this high-powered offense. Let's flip over to Monday Night Football now. Eagles-Falcons. Eagles come in with that impressive win in Brazil against the Packers with extra rest against a Falcon team that I think you almost could maybe kind of put in that panic button a little bit too. Kirk Cousins did not play well. Pittsburgh went in there and didn't score an offensive touchdown with Justin Fields, similar to the Bears, and was able to win. I'm not sure that Kirk Cousins is 100% healthy. Bijan looked good in that game, but Drake London, Kyle Pitts, just so. I think there's still some issues with this Atlanta offense, and it's going to be tough to go into Philly because that game in Brazil was one of their home games. This is their home opener now in Philadelphia. They're almost a touchdown favorite against the Falcons.
I'll address Atlanta first. Obviously, Cousins, and we're talking about what's going on with his right foot. Is he fully healthy? I don't know that right foot is fully healthy yet. I think that there's potentially some struggles there. Drake London was supposed to be, Kirk Cousins' security blanket, and Cousins was going to turn London into the Justin Jefferson, and we didn't see that at all. Kyle Pitts did score a touchdown kind of late in that game. Bijan, and we said that was going to be a tough game for the game against the Steelers, and I like the Steelers because I think I've said it several times. I think that Arthur Smith offense is going to run, chew clock, and let that Steelers defense try and go steal games for them. And 6 field goals from Boswell, and they're able to walk out of Atlanta with a win. And they now head to Denver this week in another game that should be a win over for them. On the Eagles side of the football, really have to question what was going on defense again. It seemed like the Packers and Eagles were going up and down the field again. The same problem that we saw out of the Eagles last year is that they just didn't have the ability to stop anybody. But man, you got to be excited about Saquon Barkley coming out of that game with 3 touchdowns.
You had him in fantasy, you were smiling.
Between Hurts and Brown and Smith, and now adding Barkley to the mix, that Eagles offense looks really, really good. And then you add Hurts with that running game, the push-tush still looked like it was working. They were able to have some success there. But you got to start questioning what's going on in the defensive side of the football. Green Bay, we know, has got those dynamic receivers. Right. Love looked good up until the point where they got
Jacobs
hurt.
Really settled in the second half and had a big second half against the Eagles.
And unfortunately, I think we even got kind of a messy game on that turf in Brazil where we saw guys slipping and sliding all over on those soccer field type turf. So we've seen this over and over and over again where these guys go play on these international fields and the turf just isn't right and the game seems to kind of go by the wayside there. But again, I was impressed with the Eagles offense, and I knew that was kind of what they were going to be under Kellen Moore and kind of a little bit faster pace. But man, you got to be excited about what you saw out of Barkley. But again, the Eagles are going to have to pick it up on defense if they're going to stay on the top of the NFC, because with what we saw out of the Niners and the way that defense played, the Eagles are going to have to get better on defense if they're going to find their way to the top of the NFC.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's the Niners, and then you could probably put the Eagles and Cowboys kind of a tick below them. But right now, for me, the Niners are the best team in the NFC. I want to touch on real quick last man standing for pro football. We had a 71 182 contestants. We guarantee the 150,000. We knocked out it's about 50% there too. Pro, there's only 34.58 left. So although all 4 primetime games had the favorite win, I think the Patriots not getting the cover, the Bills not giving the cover, hurt a lot of contestants in last man standing.
Yeah, and it's not only football. As we go into this weekend, we've got an outstanding weekend of events. Talk about, obviously, the baseball pennant races, but the fight cards this weekend are absolutely fantastic. UFC at the Sphere, a fantastic card Saturday. That should be a great event. We've got boxing with Alvarez here on Saturday. So, again, check out the boxing, the UFC on the app. And, again, get on the
signed
app.
up.
Check out the menu for the live wagering, the props, the same game parlays. The app is absolutely loaded with events that are going on this weekend. And again, you still got that $250 no worry wager waiting for you if you haven't signed up yet. So sign up to $250, put that $250 in, make that first bet. If you win, you get the cash. If you lose, we're going to give you $250 back. So take advantage of that big no worry wager.
It's going to be a fun weekend. I mean, baseball's still winding down. I think there's 19 or 20 games left for every team. So teams still jockeying for playoff position. As Jay mentioned, the no worry wager is really cool. There's just so much kind of fun stuff this time of year.
You know, and we started back up in football season, and if you haven't been out to our sports books, kind of at Durango, Sunset Station, Palace, GVR, obviously Red Rock, Santa Fe, GVR, we've got these monster video screens. Durango's got an awesome bar that we opened in December. If you haven't been out to Durango, they've got a 5-screen layout with a huge bar. But one of the bigger changes this year, if you haven't been out to Sunset Station, we've talked about it several times, but here at Red Rock, we've got a 96-foot video wall. It's essentially 3 screens to be able to watch the games. Sunset Station's got 152 feet of video wall, 7 massive screens. So if you're looking for a place to check out the game, in that Henderson area, heck, anywhere, make the trip over to Sunset Station and watch it out. And we did a major remodel of the audio visual at Palace Station as well. Palace Station added 6 giant 165-inch screens to be able to take in the games. So if you're in that Palace Station area, or again, looking for another place to check out the football on Saturdays and Sundays, take a look at Palace Station.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on. And for you parlay card players, too, check out our new reverse teaser card, which is another card that we added to our wagering menu. So a lot going on. Come check everything out. As Jay mentioned, get signed up for STN Sports. Check out our remodel on our new books. Should be a kind of a fun week, too. So for Jason, I'm Chucky. We're here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook, and we will see you guys next week for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends, powered by STN Sports.